Richard and Melissa, and we want to just really talk about your experience in the public speaking classroom. And you are both users of Pop's classroom as well, and hopefully for the better that has impacted your all's classroom. So we could talk about that and really just in general how you feel about teaching public speaking. So I'll start with you, Richard.
Okay. Well, I've been teaching for about 10 years now. One of the things that I try to explain to my classes right at the very beginning is it's the public speaking classes are a requirement for every student who comes through the university. So people who are engineers or whatever sports administration majors, sometimes it's difficult for them to realize why they're required to take that class.
Right.
So one of the things I try to impress upon them, if you look at some of the most successful people in the world, typically they are people who have really excellent presentation skills.
Right.
And to some degree, it's there are people who are talented at it, have a natural ability, just like there are natural musicians. But nearly everybody, just like everybody could be taught to sit down and play a scale on the piano, everybody can be taught the skills that it takes to deliver a competent presentation. So,
right.
I think they may not realize it at the time, but I think this is one of the most valuable classes a student can take.
That's definitely what I found as an engineering student. You definitely don't think about engineers itching to take their public speaking course.
Right.
Had a big impact on me.
Yeah. At some point, you're going to have to stand up in front of a client or your boss or whoever and explain why it is you want to do things a certain way or what the value of your idea is. So.
Right. So is that what got you passionate and interested in going down this path and becoming this educator?
I think so. A lot of it was just I love teaching. I love, we were talking about this earlier today, but when you're talking about something in class or you're trying to impart something to a student and 2 weeks later they do what you told them to do, it's just really kind of an awe-inspiring experience.
Right.
And yeah, they actually listened to me and it took it to heart. So.
And it clicks with them, and you see that on their face, I guess. Yeah.
So, and then it's opened up a lot of other opportunities for me once people find out that you teach public speaking or you have a little bit of experience in it, then these opportunities tend to come your way. So I've had a couple of different opportunities to go deliver presentations here and there that
right.
I really enjoy. So.
Even as small as being asked to come on a podcast. Yeah. Well, how about you, Melissa? What got you interested, or why are you passionate about teaching public speaking?
So I started teaching a few semesters ago and have experience in the corporate world through consultation that I've done, coaching, and so generally the way I work is with small teams or even individuals, kind of from a coaching perspective. So part of what I found difficult in the classroom was really getting that sort of interpersonal, like one-on-one contact. So my approach is really, yes, to share the rules of thumb and sort of the framework and best practices, but to really help students find their authentic voice and style within that. And so the freedom within that framework is really kind of what I try to pull out. And so what I found is there's not a lot of time to do that, to set up appointments with everybody. But the POPS classroom system has allowed me to share comments on specific pieces and make sure that we're connecting on that, and they can come back in and comment on my comment.
Right.
Or I can encourage, you heard what I said last time. Great job, with that, taking that feedback and running with it. So that's been really useful for my particular style, since again, I don't have the time to have one-on-one meetings with each student on a weekly basis.
Well, that's awesome to hear. That's really our goal with it, I think, is not to necessarily change what you're doing, but to enable you to do what you'd like to do and not spend so much time grading papers, for example. I didn't hear either of you mention that as a reason for getting into this.
No. Well, and kind of building on what Melissa said, software and business practices and enterprise solutions these days are moving to the cloud. So the ability to sort of be able to sit down anywhere and access your assignments and access the feedback and input and so forth. It's a great time saver, and I think that's just the way society is moving these days. So
great. So you kind of mentioned that was sort of your most difficult part of the class, is making that personal connection. What would you say would be your most trying thing within the course of the semester?
I guess really probably just trying to make it entertaining enough to capture the students' attention. So
right.
I have a repertoire of my own experiences and stories and examples and stuff that I use, so that kind of helps.
I bet if you can say, I'm not just up here telling you what to do. I've done this, and
right.
Don't just. It seems like a lot of times you hear, "Do as I say, not as I do" in the classroom. But if you can be authentic and show that I'm using these things I'm trying to teach you, I think that's great.
Right.
Another challenge, speaking of challenges in the classroom, has been, as somebody who has lots of clients kind of all over the place and doing lots of different things from day to day. I think it would be really, really difficult to keep track of emailed assignments, hard copy assignments. And so in the cases where, students have missed that or felt compelled to send me something, it's just been, really, really difficult to keep track of all that. And so now having the system where, yes, go submit it here. I can always go back and see when you submitted it, what it looked like, what my comments were, and know that it's all in one place and easy for me to sort and find, even for the archived classes. That's been really helpful. So there's been several instances where I've been working with a student and been able to say, you know what, I have a really good example from last semester of what that looked like. Let me,
That was one of the challenges I faced when I first started teaching. Was I'm not really a very organized person anyway. So when you take paper assignments, they're headed out the door, so they leave a paper on your desk, and so you have a big stack of papers, and you stick them in your bag or briefcase or whatever, and then 2 weeks later the student says, well, I gave it to you, and well, I don't have it, so it's kind of just becomes a he said, she said sort of a thing. So the ability to sort of have everything centralized and there's a record and it's all there, you can go and look at it at any time, is really eliminates a lot of those issues that seem to pop up.
Mm-hmm. And we've heard from some, well, I can do that on Blackboard. I can have everyone turn everything in electronically. And yes, you can, but the difference, I think, with what our approach has been is this is all specifically designed for a public speaking classroom. You've got everything from the preparation to delivery and the review from a student and an instructor perspective. And that brings it all together in a way where hopefully, you're giving them feedback, they'll take that and apply it because it's literally right next to where they're actually creating that work. So to me, that's the differentiator between kind of a learning management system and what Pop's Classroom is. It's not just a big storage warehouse. It's that, but that enables you to work and review all in the same place. Mm-hmm.
And Blackboard and any of the other dozen learning management systems that are out there are good for what they do, but they're sort of built in to be applicable to any course or any field. So they're not, you can use it for chemistry or physics or business or whatever. So it doesn't really reinforce some of the things that's specific to the material that you're specifically teaching.
Right. Now, I know you taught before you used Pop's Classroom and originally Student Sheet. Did you teach before using the application, public speaking?
No, so not public speaking.
Okay. Well, interesting perspective. So I was going to ask, one of the things that I think I find most interesting is the ability to give the quick response feedback from everyone in the room. Did you have your students give peer feedback before using that?
No, I didn't. And actually, I think that was one of the features that when it was introduced, I was like, because I just saw the value immediately in it. And what I would do, what I was doing, everything was paper-based before. Mm-hmm. So, or they would do it in a Word doc and then submit it by Blackboard. But I would have one student critique another student, maybe for one speech.
Right.
And it was sort of an awkward, you had to assign everybody, draw numbers or whatever it is. You're going to critique this person, that person, and so forth. So, and and we did it for one speech, and it was sort of, they would turn it in a week later, so it wasn't really relevant to actually what happened during the speech. So the thing about POPs is the ability to sort of randomize critiquers. So, it's all, done in just a second, and they can do it in real time. So when they complete their assessment, the speaker sees the assessment, and one of the key values of that, for one, a lot of times the other students are a lot more detailed in their critiques than I really have time to be, because they're only critiquing one person. I'm critiquing maybe 24 at a time. And not only that, it tends to reinforce, if I say, well, this is something maybe you did this very well, and maybe this you need to work on a little bit. If a student says that, one of their peers says that as well, I think it reinforces they know that I'm just not blowing smoke or making something up. So
right, and they hear it from someone who is same sort of person they are, same age, same background, and maybe and obviously it helps hearing it from a peer.
Right.
Have you enjoyed that aspect of feedback? And
in that way, it makes me feel like they're not just hearing it from me and knowing that I have specific pet peeves or ways to look at it. They're getting it either reinforced or getting another perspective, which has been really nice. And just having them with an eye towards those questions, sort of the immediacy of that in the classroom has been really helpful to know that they are thinking about it through that lens.
Right. And so for me, rather than just do it for one speech and then it's due a week or so after the speech is delivered, I do it for every speech, and they do it in real time as the person is speaking, so they get that feedback immediately. And with my own, I'll sit on it for a week or a couple days just to maybe go back and review and look over my comments and stuff. So they're getting immediate feedback, and then they're getting feedback from me a couple days or a week later that works all together.
Right. Now, do you both have students do self-reviews as well?
Yes.
Do you have them video their speeches in class?
Yes.
Yeah, that's right. So it's really easy for me to go in and have it play, on the same screen. I can watch the video and also sort of take my notes and save it and then come back to it. So again, I don't have to worry about having, Post-its everywhere, documents in certain places. It's all right there, and then I know I can come back to it before I submit it.
Sometimes you miss something that, or if you mark that maybe you weren't clear on your preview, and then the student says, well, I thought I was clear on it. Then you can go back and review it. Sometimes they are correct and you missed it, and other times maybe they missed it. So it reinforces that. But I always tell the students that the most difficult aspect of the class is going to be watching yourself do a presentation and then critiquing it, because they can find that painful sometimes. So.
I found it painful, but it was also the thing that, just like hearing it from a peer helps, seeing it from yourself, I think that's...
Yeah. And a lot of times there are things that people do when they're speaking that they're just not aware of. Yeah. Maybe they're swaying back and forth, or people tapping on the podium or something like that, or people with longer hair like me tend to play with their hair or something, or, so pointing that out, making them aware of it, and see here, maybe that's a little bit distracting. I think it helps make them aware of that for the next speech.
Right. I think your classes are face-to-face this semester, right?
I do both. I have one online and 2 face-to-face.
Okay. And do you?
Both of mine are face-to-face.
Okay. Have you taught an online course?
No, I sure haven't. So I have experience teaching, not public speaking, but doing other facilitations and teaching through corporate America.
So how do you find it different or similar teaching online or in face-to-face? Because you have some people, and I've talked to some, that think the idea of an online public speaking course is, it's crazy. But
well, now when I first started doing the online courses, we would meet on campus 3 times a semester for them to deliver their presentations in class. We sort of started gravitating a little bit towards all completely online, because there are situations where somebody's trying to finish their degree and maybe they're in the military. I've had people in a foreign country who were in the military and trying to finish their degree. So there's just no way they can get to campus, or working mothers or people who travel a lot or something like that. So having the ability to record your speech and put it online, for one, it allows them to do it remotely, and it also allows their peers to look at it too. So you retain that aspect of it. So
that's been one thing that it's kind of just come out of this happenstance, because we really focused on when we started Pop's Classroom for the face-to-face courses. Mm-hmm. But then when it started being used in online courses, we saw that it, in some ways, is even better for online, because it brings everything together in a way that is even more difficult when you don't have that face-to-face. So if we can enable that kind of feedback there, that's even better.
Right. And there are a lot of people who maybe they started their degree and life happened and they had to let it go, and they're wanting to come back and finish it up. So it just smooths the pathway out for them. So.
Right. Well, is there anything else that you all wanted to say about whether it's Pop's Classroom or just your classes? If I know we kind of skimmed over that in the beginning, but just in general about public speaking, or that you would want to get across in this, or.
Well, I think something I said at the beginning was that. Like I said, there are natural gifted speakers who just can stand up there and wing a speech like that off the top of their head. But everybody can learn the basic skills that it takes to deliver a presentation. And there are examples that they go to of successful people. That one of my favorites is Steve Jobs' commencement address at Stanford in 2005. And he, not 100%, but very closely follows the format in which we teach, presentation skills is sort of 3 main point format. But once they get through the semester, or even get through a couple of speeches and realize, hey, this isn't as frightening as I thought it was, I think it improves their confidence in public speaking, but also I think improves their overall confidence. So.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's something I usually mention and kind of share my philosophy early on in the semester, that the expectation is not that everybody walks away, being a professional public speaker. We're not professional public speakers, but that we don't want this to get in the way of your ideas and achieving the things you want to achieve. So we want to, think about the anxiety built up with that, and then also just kind of some foundational skills and some competencies, so you've got something to pull on, a couple of years from now when you start working and you have to get up in front of people.
And once you really start thinking about it, no matter what field they're going to go into, there is at some point they're going to be required to stand up in front of a group of people. Maybe it's in business, maybe they're wanting a street light at the end of their street and they're going to talk to the city council or something like that. But all sorts of opportunities that are going to come up where the words that, or your ability to get up and deliver a presentation, is going to have an impact on your life or your society or whatever. So.
Well, that's one of the things we've tried to get across in the POPs community, is the power of public speaking isn't necessarily something that just pertains to standing up in a lectern and giving a presentation to a sitting room. It could be an interview even, and if you can communicate well, we interviewed someone on our podcast. They said it was the magic bullet. It's the thing that can really set you apart and open doors, and that's what we try to highlight.
Right. Well, one of the classes I teach is business and professional speaking, so it's almost entirely business majors, and most of them, whether they know it or not at this point, if they go into finance or something like that, their first jobs out of college are probably going to be selling financial products or selling insurance or something, which perfectly honorable professions, but their success in those fields is going to depend in large part on their ability to get up in front of a group of clients or whatever and persuade them to purchase their product or invest in their company or whatever that might be.
Right.
And it's all going to come down to presentation skills.
Right. Can you tell us a little bit about your experience in the corporate world, like you said?
Yeah, so, and I've actually had some folks that I used to work with come in, and I was just thinking about guest speakers, because I've had quite a few students who want to open their own business, be entrepreneurs, and be small business owners. And so I've had a couple of small business owners come in and say, just because you'll have the ping pong table and you'll get to do your own thing, part of the idea is that you're going to be able to sell the product and sell your business. So I've definitely had that. Yeah, but certainly from, I was in a role where I did lots of training and sort of was, up and talking in front of people. But as somebody who hired people in my career, I am able to sort of share with students, here's what I look for, and here's what's going to set you apart. And so much of it has to do with communication and being able to translate. So specifically for people who are in more technical majors, or imagine that they'll be in technical, maybe they're in accounting or engineering, but really what's going to set you apart is the ability to sort of communicate across some of those divides.
And know your audience. You're going to communicate the same thing very differently to two different types of groups.
Right. And we're living in an increasingly global society, so you need to be aware of things that you may say in casual conversation that you would think nothing of, that may be offensive to somebody from another culture.
Right.
Those sorts of things you need to be aware of.
Some colleagues of mine actually just took a business trip to China, and I think that culture in particular is one that has some very different business traditions than in the U.S., and you have to be cognizant of that, and you really offend somebody fairly quickly if you don't know these things, or at least attempt to know those things.
And even different parts of the United States that people have different ways of speaking in Florida as they do maybe in California or whatever. So
it always reminds me of, I actually never really watched the show, but I saw this clip from American Idol where they were in Louisville here.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
And the guy said, or something like, "You all take care."
Take care.
Yeah. And they took it as a threat. And that's just something we say around here, like, "Y'all take care." Like, not that you need to look over your shoulder, but just hope everything's well with you.
No, I remember that. And an example I use, I lived in Louisiana for many years. The grassy area in the middle of a divided highway, anywhere else would be called the median. In New Orleans, they call that the neutral ground because, 150 years ago, different neighborhoods sort of kept separate, but they would meet on a certain day of the week to conduct business. And they have these wide boulevards with that grassy area, and the tradition was there was no arguing or fighting, and that was the neutral ground. And that name has stuck ever since. So that's always one of the examples I tell my students in class.
Right.
And I teach business and professional communication also, and so that's something I always talk about based on my experiences. Not that you need to know all of those details about different cultures, but the idea of cultural humility. So being able to ask the questions and having people in your corner. So that idea of diversity in terms of your sort of personal board of directors is what I call it. But just knowing, who you go to lunch with and who you're spending time with and who's going to stop and say, before you say this, let me educate you.
Yeah.
So.
Right. Well, I really appreciate, again, you all taking the time to speak with me, and I'm very thankful for what you do in teaching public speaking and communication skills, and I'm incredibly excited and glad that Pop's Classroom sounds like enhanced that in several ways, and that's our goal.
Thank you.
I appreciate it.
Appreciate it. Thanks.